What's up, Coach TJ?
Welcome back.
We're so back.
Back in the studio.
Back in the studio, and I am 5 cookies deep as of now.
Well, I'm 1 protein shake deep.
Nice. Are you protein shaking right now?
Right now.
Damn. That's how committed to the protein lifestyle.
You have to get that protein in when you can.
Yeah.
It's a busy day.
24/7.
How else am I going to get 150 grams of protein a day?
So you don't actually need 1 gram per pound of body weight.
You don't, but I do.
You do.
I'm a high protein athlete.
High protein athlete and high carb.
And high carb.
High energy intake. I'm a high cookie athlete.
I think I eat more than anybody I know.
I'm a close second, though.
I'm on my 4th snack of the day.
How much of our relationship is just because I was like the first person that you were like, okay, we eat approximately the same amount?
It helps. It helps to have that overlap.
The first time I brought you home, my mom was like, holy fuck.
Soup and a salad is not the ideal lunch for me.
Respectfully. Because like at least your mom, like you've always been an athlete. Your mom is used to cooking for boys, which I'm told is like a whole different thing than raising daughters, apparently. But yeah, the first time I brought you home to my parents, my mom was like, I can't even believe how much food we have to make.
It's bad.
It stresses them out.
How many boxes of mini muffins do your parents have to buy if I stay over for a week?
I mean, like it's like you do like at one point you were like a pack a day muffin guy.
That, people wonder what the special sauce is going into a 100-miler. It's 1 pack of Abe's mini muffins a day for 2 to 3 days before the race, and 1 box of pasta a day for 2 to 3 days before the race.
Box a day. Wow.
That's how you get your carbs in.
You're definitely meeting your carb goals.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
All right. Speaking of carb goals, we're going to talk about what I think is one of the worst carbohydrate delivery systems ever. We're going to do some hot or nots. We're going to answer a listener question, and then we're going to talk about heat training.
Yes.
It's getting hot in here. So take off all of your clothes.
Ice down.
Ice down.
Ice bath.
Ice on. Ice bath. Don't ice bath. Those are stupid.
Palmer cool yourself during your workday.
Yep. Omnius headband, $200 fancy headband, whatever it is. We're going to talk about how to heat train. But if you have a hot or not question you want us to answer, they should email, he's taking a drink of protein, microcosmcoaching@gmail.com. Hit us up. DM us on Instagram. We're at Microcosm Coaching. Give us a follow. If you're watching this on YouTube, drop a comment. Let us know what you want us to rate, hot or not, or if you have a listener question. Even if you don't, just leave a comment because that's helpful for the algorithm.
Also, a little bit more shameless self-promotion. We have a community. Mm-hmm. That's where we got these questions from. Mm-hmm. So run streaks, drinking milk during ultras. Oh, God. And sitting down at aid stations, these were hot or not questions that came through in our community Slack channel. You guys can join the community, $10 a month with code Foothills. Hit us up. We'd love to have you guys join the conversation with us over there. You get access to coaches, 2 monthly office hour sessions. It's a great way to, get some FaceTime with the coach, go over your training. And we've got a listener question here from one of our members of that part of the community. So that's exciting.
Join a community, participate virtually. You do you, Holmes.
Yeah.
All right. Number 1, TJ, run streaks, hot or not?
Oh, gosh. This is really tough because I have literally not worked with athletes because they weren't able to take a rest day because they were run streaking.
That's like one of the first things if I'm having a meeting with an athlete and they're like, I don't do rest days. That's like my first thing of like, we may not work together.
Yeah. I mean, I've literally stopped the consultation.
Yeah.
Are you willing to work? Are you willing to take a rest day? No, I'm not.
Okay. Adios.
You're not the right athlete for me.
Think of me when you slide into the MRI machine.
Rest days are just so important. That's just, we talked a lot about stress 2 episodes ago. If you don't have that time carved out for recovery, what's the point of even doing the training? Because you're not going to get any better.
I'm going to say something provocative. You cannot get better at running while you're doing a run streak. At minimum, you can barely maintain. And you can only maintain if you are like a genetic freak who has the life conditions that enable you to maintain. Because the fact of the matter is, in order to get better at running, you have to do more overtime. And in order to do more, that means you have to occasionally do less or nothing at all to build that capacity. Run streaks do physiological biologically do not allow you to take that step back that you need to take a step forward and build capacity. So I think run streaks are only for people who want to get Instagram followers but don't have a six pack.
I do have to, come in here with a little N of one. Since switching coaches, I do not always take a rest day every week anymore.
Yeah.
And
you're also not streaking.
No,
it's not like your whole personality is like not resting, which like if your whole personality is not resting, get a better personality. Jesus Christ. Go to top golf, pick up the banjo, do any fucking other thing as your shtick.
I do want to just say that my Strava AI tells me, wow, 37-day streak. That's incredible. And I'm like, that's not the validation I need. I do take rest days, and I take them when I feel like an active recovery day is no longer helpful. But I've also been training as an athlete for a couple decades at this point, and well over a decade in the running space. It takes a while to be able to do that. A lot of athletes they make that mistake. They think like, let me add that 7th day. And it's like, well, probably not, because like you get a stress fracture every single year, or you consistently have niggles, like all of those things.
I've been training for 10 years consistently.
Right?
Yeah. And I take a rest day every week. Also, I have this new game that I play with myself with the Strava AI. Every time it gives me one of the little things, I read it in the Forrest Gump voice. It's so funny. Next time you get the little Strava AI, read it in the Forrest Gump voice and tell me if it sounds smart.
My favorite thing about Strava AI is like, I'll go out on a technical trail run. They're like, great day at recovery pace. And I'm like, wow, that did not feel like recovery pace, but I appreciate you noticing that I was going pretty slow out there.
Yeah. Or like once I made a tongue-in-cheek, like my title was like, I wish I had friends, something stupid like that. And the AI was like, great, run with all of your friends. And I was like, okay, like, thank God I'm like mentally healthy, because I could see a world where like having the Forrest Gump AI voice nag me about not having a rich social life could send me over the edge.
So run streaks, not hot. If that's like part of your identity, maybe get that checked out.
Get a new identity. That's a bad identity. That's a stupid fucking identity.
Okay.
Start cross stitching, or like get really into owls. Anything else.
I love owls.
Owls are sick.
All right. Speaking of hot, Cocodona, that's a pretty hot race.
It sold out in 8 minutes this morning.
I don't understand why.
I work at Ultra Sign Up, and low-key almost.
Chime in the comments.
8 minutes. That's not enough time to decide. That's such a big decision to make.
Why do people like this? Hit the comments.
That's why we're wrong about Cocodona in the comments.
Yeah, I want to know, what is the allure around it? But more importantly, guys, more importantly than that, hot or not, drinking milk during ultras. Okay, this is a thing that evidently my athletes have been talking about on the community Slack channel.
The fuck?
And they're not doing it because I don't advise that they do, but evidently folks are doing that in longer ultras.
Lanson do this. So I'm just gonna free ball, and this is like really me shooting from the hip, no science. Gross. Fucking gross, you guys.
Disgusting.
So gross.
What are you thinking?
So weird, dude. Hot cow juice while you're running,
curdled in your flask.
I mean, I do sometimes in longer ultras, I'll drink recovery mix, like the Tailwind recovery mix or Scratch recovery mix, because it does, like, there's that getting like later in ultras potentially getting like 8 to 10 grams of protein can be useful. You don't usually want to go over 10 grams of protein in an hour. A little bit of fat, but milk doesn't necessarily have, I would say, the most like ideal breakdown of macronutrients. I mean, if you're doing Cocodona, if you're walking, like, sure, dude, like, it's your life, run streak, drink milk, whatever. I also did ask Kylie about this, and she, who is a registered dietitian nutritionist, she said, "You gross, don't do it." And she tries to dissuade her clients from trying it.
Man, do we even need to go deeper on this? I think it's a resounding not hot.
Yeah, I'm not into it. I mean, I guess like if some folk, I'm not into it. I can't come to a place of nuance on this.
I have not had an athlete approach me yet in one of our one-on-ones where they've been like, so I'm really considering doing milk during ultras.
Kylie told me she was consulting with a high-level pro athlete who was competing at UTMB, and this specific athlete was questioning about integrating milk into their nutrition plan, and Kylie dissuaded them.
Do they want to have a lot of bathroom breaks during
That was
ultra?
Kylie's question. She was like, how much stoppage time do you want to add to your circle here?
How many baby wipes do you want to put in your pack?
Just like, there's another way, you guys. There's so many other ways.
All right. Hot or not, sitting down at aid stations?
I'm going to say mostly not hot. I think you and I have both had the experience of getting sucked into a chair.
Yes.
I think I've only had one time where I successfully got out of a chair, and it was pretty good. Actually, so like when I did Run Rabbit 100 a few years ago, the final, like I had a drop bag at like mile like 78, maybe mile 80. So I still had like several hours to go to finish this event. I remember it was like the sun had just barely come up. It's like 0 degrees on the Continental Divide. And I was like, I really like, but there were no aid station volunteers who could like help me like get the stuff out of my drop bag as quickly as I wanted to. So I had to sit down. I just remember the whole time being like, oh my God, I'm sitting down. This is so bad. This is so bad. I was able to get up and go, but it was not, I was like nervous the whole time that I was going to get cold. So I like pulled my drop bag over to like a bonfire they had going. And then last year at Leadville, I sat down at Twin Lakes both times just to change shoes, but I was in and out very quickly.
I sat down at Twin Lakes and almost didn't get up.
Yep. And then you sat down also at May Queen, which was...
was it? Yeah, May Queen.
That was a bad sit. That was a bad sit. We have a picture of you from this race.
I saw the Lord.
It looks like you're seeing God.
I saw God in that.
Honestly, it looks like an old Renaissance painting of like the Christ figure, where it's just like...
Oh, the full body lockup.
Yeah, it was bad. You started shivering. We immediately put down jackets on you and blankets. I would be really careful with sitting. It can be strategic, right? Like if you need to sit down to change your shoes, but I would say as much as possible. Like if you can change shoes standing, fucking do that.
I did a no sit at Western States.
Oh yeah, no sit.
No sit.
Love that.
Yeah.
That was an improvement, you think?
Yes. Keep on moving. Keep on moving.
Yeah, team no sit.
All right, let's get into our listener question. I know people are anxious to
I bet our marathoners are listening to this. They're like, are you guys fucking serious? You're talking about whether or not you should sit down during a race?
Well, listen, I think a great hot or not, and we don't have to answer this today, is walking during a marathon. Because I have some pretty fast marathoners who are consistently going under 3 and they still walk. Some of that.
Like to eat or like to grab the water?
To spend too much time at an aid station or to walk because they feel tired. So maybe next time we'll talk about walking during marathons, hot or not.
I actually do have a study I can bring into
Little teaser.
There is science on this.
I can't wait to hear your opinion on this, Zoe, because I've got a pretty strong one myself.
I can't wait for my opinion to be based on evidence.
I like the feels, vibes.
All vibes, baby.
All right, listener question. I'm scheduled to run Never Summer 100K at the end of July.
Oh my God, same.
But in a twist, I was accepted into the Berlin Marathon. Through a special Abbott lottery. And the race is on September 21st. I'm going to run it because it will be my 5th of the 6 world marathon majors, and it's a bucket list goal. So the question, would it be reasonable what would be a reasonable approach for a master's athlete who is self-coached to take in preparation for a flat, fast road marathon 8 weeks after high altitude mountain 100K? And then my initial thought is it might be good to dial back my goals for the 100K to focus on finishing and avoiding injury while working on building aerobic capacity and ensuring I don't neglect my speed. I completely recognize throwing Never Summer in there before Berlin is less than ideal. Well, good awareness.
Love the self-awareness here. And I love that this person is clear on their why. Like, I feel like, are these goals the most optimal? Maybe not, but I also love this person's clarity around like, this would be really stressful if the question was, how do I PR both of these things? And I love that this person isn't doing that, there are lots of different valid ways to engage with events, and we can't always be gunning for every PR all of the time when we have things that are this different. Like a long Never Summer 100K it's a proper mountain race, and Berlin is like famously like the fastest like of the world major. Like that and Chicago tend to be have the most prevalent like instances of world record events. So those are definitely tough. And I think, you know, for me, one way like bringing my trail running bias to what I think about is like, well, you have like Never Summer, like a solid finish time for that is like 14, 15, 16 hours.
Yeah.
Versus like maybe 3.5, 4 hours in the marathon, just to like throw some vibey numbers out there. If you're going to be 10% slower at either of those races, I would rather be 10% slower at the marathon because that's a few minutes. 10% slower at Never Summer 100K could be like 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the important thing here is to adjust expectations.
Yeah.
And to set like this athlete mentioned is to set some really realistic goals for the 100K and some realistic goals for the marathon. Like if it's a bucket list race, does that mean you want to finish it as well as you possibly can? Are you happy to just event it? So it doesn't matter what the finishing time is. You just want to get it done and have the experience. I think one of these two races probably needs to lean towards that eventing side. Unfortunately, with the way this kind of like lines up, like just really like pragmatically speaking, like that's likely just going to have to be the marathon. Because in order to, I think
the risks too, right? Like the risks you run being improperly trained for or like being less optimally trained for a marathon are lesser than the risks of being less optimally trained for the 100K. Like, you know, you can bang out a pretty solid marathon with like suboptimal training, but like with a 100K, especially one that's so technical, high altitude, long, like 100K is a long freaking way to go. There are like injury risks and like durability concerns there. Exactly. So I would definitely try to optimize for the 100K. But I would also say that like, you know, doing some speed, right? Like, you know, having like a track workout during the week, like that doesn't necessarily have to be on trail. Like I think there's a way that you can kind of yes and this, and like getting really fit and having your focus be on like during the week, getting in great shape, working on that speed. And then on the weekend, doing more event specific training, like doing those longer runs and doing more like climbing, descending. Definitely you want to practice some power hiking for Never Summer 100K, would sort of help get you more, fueling would help you get more specifically ready for that event too. What are your thoughts there?
Exactly. Just to play, I think that you're right there on the right path, Zoe. It's about maximizing the training for the 100K and making sure that you're ready for the really specific demands of that event. Like the marathon isn't a distance that isn't also specific, but the one that's got a higher risk for injury, like totally just like having like a death marching experience is, and just like really overdoing it in terms of how long it takes you to complete it. That's gonna be Never Summer. That's a hard race. It's at altitude. It's got mountainous terrain. I would make sure that the training is very specific to that event and then take that fitness into the marathon after a really high quality recovery. And I think that's the real crux of this, is not rushing the recovery after Never Summer and making sure that you're fully recovered, even if that just means you only get 1 week where you can do a little speed work and a small long run before you have to like taper for Berlin. That's okay. That's okay, because that fitness really isn't going to go anywhere in that amount of time, as long as you're not totally couch bound.
Correct.
For more than a couple weeks after the race.
Because it won't matter how fit you are if you're overtrained or injured.
Yeah.
So don't be overtrained, don't be injured, and then maximize fitness.
Right. Like if you recover really, really well, you take those first 2 weeks, no runs more than 60 minutes, everything at like a zone 1, 4 out of 10 effort, full probably week off of running after the event anyways. I think then you could start to come back, build in some strides, get your turnover going, maybe do a long run, and then, you know, make sure you go into Berlin really fresh.
Yeah. See you at Never Summer. High five me. Can't wait to meet you. You sound awesome. This is a baller lineup and I'm jealous.
I think you know this listener because they come to our community calls and our coaching sessions and all that. So you guys might get to exchange some high fives out there at the race.
Love that. Wish I was going to Berlin with you. Land of my people, the Schnitzel people.
Let's talk about heat. What runners get wrong about heat?
Heat training, very buzzy lately. People are talking about it. People are blogging about it.
People are wearing suits.
People are wearing suits.
Hot heat suits.
Do you have a heat suit?
Oh, God, no. I'm not really a 1%.
Got a meat suit.
Yeah. I get hot enough.
That's right. You're a sweaty boy.
Not really a 1% gains kind of guy.
Yeah. I think like we're going to talk specifically about heat training and what about heat training is actual effective training backed by science and what falls into the category more of pseudoscience or hacks. Heat training is a powerful tool, but it's also a really powerful stressor. So it does need to be used correctly to improve endurance, efficiency, and resilience. Because if it's misused or misallocated, it can backfire hard. So today we're going to get into what works, what's hype, and how to use heat exposure strategically, especially if you're preparing for a hot race. Or, I think there's also been a lot of discussion around yes, there are studies. I don't know if we're going to get into this. Hopefully I'm not spoiling it. Studies that are showing the benefits of year-round heat training. And that's not something I actually really promote with athletes because that's a pretty marginal gain. Like if I have an athlete who never misses a day of training, never misses a day of strength, is meeting with Kylie twice a month to dial in their nutrition, hydration, and they're absolutely nailing it, then if they're nailing the top 10 fundamentals, go back and listen to our episode about the 11 fundamentals that every runner needs to nail, then maybe we could talk about year-round sauna training.
Yeah.
But I'm not convinced that that's something that most runners need to focus on or work on. And you and I are elites, and we don't do that. N of 2. That's a huge sample size of 2 people right
Two
here.
people there, guys. Actually, no, the science, and we'll talk about the science of how long it takes to adapt to the heat, at what percentage of heat adaptation you lose after adapting based on not being exposed to it. And we'll also talk about the stress behind heat, which is really important for athletes to understand. And training is this game of prioritizing stresses. Mm-hmm. What are the most important stresses? And so I could just totally go down that rabbit hole. Let's not do it. Let's not do it right now.
You almost short-circuited. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what heat is and what it does in the body. So heat creates physiological stress by making your body work harder to maintain homeostasis. But those stress comes from different places. Do you want to walk me through this, TJ?
Yeah. So heat really challenges your body's ability to cool. And we're talking about your core temperature and also to manage fluid loss, because when you sweat, that helps to keep you cool. And so why would we train for the heat? In short, we would train for the heat because we want to focus on expanding our plasma volume, which is going to help with more thermoregulation, which is going to keep our core temp lower. And there's a bunch of different things that's going to affect. And we can use this in a couple different ways. People will use this, 1, to improve performance, and 2, to improve performance specifically in the heat. So you can do this to improve your performance in cold temperatures too, because when your plasma volume increases, it correlates to
higher blood volume and better cardiac stroke output.
All that.
All good things.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what specifically happens in the body in the heat. So the first thing that we're looking at is core temperature increase. And that's what triggers a cascade of these thermoregulatory responses, like cardiac strain increase. Your heart rate climbs as blood gets redirected to the skin, right? Like your body's going to shunt blood to the skin with the idea of exposing it to the air, cooling it down, and then circulating it back through the body.
So this is, one of the reasons why you might see at the past Olympic trials, folks going out to the start line with ice vests to keep their core temp as cold as possible, or folks, in ultras, putting ice all over their body, getting really wet. They're doing whatever they can to keep that plasma volume down in their core to help with their metabolism, to keep their core temperature as low as possible as the heat works to bring that core temp up, which is going to increase your RPE and make everything feel harder, and then eventually bring your heart rate up and lower your output levels. So a lot of different techniques out there you guys have probably noticed for staying cool during hot conditions. But the effects of this on performance are really, really real. Anybody who's running the heat, kind of recognizes it. It's so important to like understand exactly what's going on under the hood, because then you also understand like what are the reasons to train for the heat and to adapt to the heat.
Right. Another big thing that's happening, pretty intuitive, your sweat rate increases, which accelerates fluid and electrolyte loss. And that's why we are always harping on our athletes to do fluid loss tests and electrolyte loss tests, because your fluid loss is going to change. As you become more heat adapted, you will sweat more.
Yeah.
Cool, body. Thanks. Love that for all of us.
Thanks. I just get dehydrated
So that's something
faster.
like you can do multiple fluid loss tests, like you weigh yourself naked, run for an hour, not naked, come back, weigh yourself again, naked, to see how much fluid you lose. Don't run naked. That's very important. That is a crime. Don't do that. And then you can sort of adapt that. But what won't change is your sodium concentration. So how much sodium is in like any given liter of your sweat. So if you're, sweating 1 liter versus 2 liters, that concentration will stay the same. But as you get fitter, you are putting out more of that sweat. And your electrolyte concentration is extremely individually variable. So that's something that you really can only figure out through a sodium concentration test like Levelin, like Precision. Seeing salt on your skin or your hat, that doesn't tell you shit. Please do not email me about that. That is not science. Assuming you're a salty sweater, also not science. If your fingers swell, that could either mean you're getting too much sodium or not enough sodium. The sort of like the symptoms of not getting enough sodium and of getting too much are almost identical. So that's why we really like push the sweat tests. I promise we're not getting a kickback. I wish we were, because I feel like we're doing a heck of a job getting them out there.
We don't get a kickback, but we do partner with Levelin. So if you're a part of the community at Microcosm, even down to the foothills level, which we've talked about, you get 20% off of that testing. And so, almost all of our athletes at this point have gotten that test done. And what's really cool is it's a nice investment. You only need to do it once.
Yeah.
And then you have that information forever, and you just update your fluid loss to get the concentration right based on current fitness and environmental factors. Man, I just can't stress, like, for myself as an athlete, like what a game changer it was like 4 or 5 years ago to get that test done and to finally realize like you need 400 more milligrams of sodium an hour. That's why you keep getting side stitches later in races. I could not figure out why like the last hour of every race was ruined by side stitches.
Yeah.
Until I got that.
How many milligrams of sodium do you aim for an hour?
850.
850.
Yeah.
I usually do about 500 to 600. It's extremely individually variable. So
Yeah.
Again, that's why I really like reinforce. I'm sure we'll do an episode on this eventually, but there's a really fascinating gap in where the research currently is versus where the prescriptions are, or like what we're actually seeing people do in practice. The research hasn't caught up, which I always think is interesting and exciting. But get those sweat tests done, because that's definitely going to be very, like, if you're doing heat training, if you're doing sauna exposures and you haven't done a sweat test,
no point.
I mean, that's really fucking stupid. That's like the lowest hanging fruit. Like, get that sweat test done, develop a hydration plan that meets your specific needs. So when we talk about repeated heat exposure, which is like usually 7 to 14 days, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be 7 to 14 bouts, but a week, 2 weeks is usually what it takes for athletes to adapt to the heat. So
fairly consistent exposure.
Your plasma volume will expand by 10 to 15%, which is going to support better blood flow and cooling, right? Like if your body is better able to move more blood around, more of it's getting exposed to that surface temperature differential and then circulated back to the core to cool things down. Your sweating becomes more efficient. It starts earlier, and you sweat more. So that's another thing that we're seeing there.
Yeah, and the concentration of that sweat in terms of how much sodium is in there is going to be reduced because there's more volume of sweat. Also, your RPE is going to stay more even for like the same workload rather than to continue to climb because it feels very hot and the heat makes everything feel harder. You're going to start to be able to like level out there and be able to maintain similar output levels even when it's hot. So a key study here, Lorenzo et al. 2010 found that 10 days of heat acclimatization improved cyclist performance in cool conditions by 6.5%, primarily due to plasma volume expansion and improved cardiac output. And I think what's really just important to note there is like when you get those kind of gains, especially when it cools off, that that to a lot of people is a very meaningful training adaptation to go for. And that's why you're going to see a lot of folks on the internet wearing heat suits, getting in the sauna. But the issue with all of that is if that protocol isn't part of your overall training, heat creates a lot of stress on the system. And so if it's not part of an overall protocol, likely it's going to put you in a fatigue hole and you're not going to get the benefits from your training or the heat that you're doing.
Yeah, because for most recreational athletes, the thing we want to do in training is like just train more. Right. And if you're getting to the place where you're already like training about as much as you can, and we're really looking to optimize at the margins, that's maybe where year-round heat exposure can come into play. But again, like that's not something that I as a coach have recommended. I have some, like you do some like hot tub. Like if I have athletes that have access to a sauna, we can talk about how to implement that in a way that doesn't add stress, but it's not something that I like recommend athletes seek out. Like starting to hot tub is not going to be the training breakthrough you think it is.
Well, and really like, oh man, I love this topic because it's all about what, like I mentioned earlier and almost spoiled the whole podcast. It's about managing what are the important training priorities and stresses. So fitness is always our number one buffer against the heat. Mm-hmm. Before you get acclimated to the heat, before you've done a protocol to keep your core temp lower and maximize your plasma volume and help with thermoregulation. Like before you've done any of that, your fitness is the most important thing. So if you're sacrificing training stress for heat training stress, you have your priorities backwards. Yeah. You're not maximizing what you really should be maximizing, which is, I think for me, the biggest case against doing year-round regular sauna, especially because you lose these adaptations really, really fast. Yeah. And we'll talk about just what that looks like in a little bit. So like you have to very regularly be on top of this to maintain those plasma levels, which is a lot of work.
Getting to the hot tub time machine once a month is not going to do the trick.
We don't have a hot tub. So, we have a hot bath, and that actually is very effective. We'll talk about a study in a little bit.
I love watching John Oliver in the bathtub.
But man, like anybody who's really cooked themselves in the sauna or gone out on a hot run and cooked themselves in the heat just knows how that affects the nervous system. And it's also very individualized. Some people are affected by it more than others. So we'll talk about that as well. So what heat training doesn't do, we should really clear this up, some of these common myths.
Yeah, so heat training does not increase your red blood cell count. That's something that you see floated around in the influencer space a lot. And that's a big difference from altitude, right? I think that one of the big misconceptions is like heat is the poor man's altitude, and heat does not replace altitude training. The adaptations are parallel, but not overlapping. So I don't recommend people just add on heat. Like if you're in Texas training for Leadville, going to the sauna, like again, is maybe not going to be the flex you think it is and won't get you those specific adaptations. And there's a lot of other more specific training adaptations that will be more helpful, such as just improving fitness. And more heat doesn't always equal better adaptation. Overloading too quickly will increase your injury, fatigue, or illness risk.
Oh gosh, I am one of those athletes who, tried to like keep their plasma volume up in the winter because I train a lot down at the gym 20 minutes away, and there's a sauna, and I used to like to pop in there after, and I'd be wondering like, man, why are my patience levels like degrading? Like, why do I feel so stressed? And after a while I was just like, it's got to be the heat. It's that added variable. Just trying to survive in the sauna for 20 minutes after you've just done a workout takes a lot out of you. I don't know. It really does up the chance for greater fatigue and injury. It really is a significant stressor. I can't overstate that. And it's also like heat training isn't about toughening up.
No,
this has to be a carefully managed stressor. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the protocols that we use for our athletes who race at like Western states, or Badwater and do these really hot races. So there's a real science to the training and the architecture of that and how it all works together. So when and how to use heat training, when to use it.
Like you said, when you're training for a hot or a humid race. Western states is a really notable example. Bad water. We have lots of athletes that do javelina. I had an athlete that did Cocodona. I had a couple athletes do Cocodona. And obviously, because we did some heat training, it snowed during Cocodona. Go figure. Perfect milk drinking temps, I guess. CCC, a pretty hot and humid race. But again, I would say like any time where you're looking at sustained hotter temperatures, if you're racing in the southeast, I like, and actually this is something I wish I had the specific study at my fingertips right now, but running in humidity is harder than altitude. Like it is physiologically harder than altitude, and it impacts performances. Humidity impacts performances more than running at altitude does. So yeah, I think that heat training can also be helpful when you're looking to improve that cardiovascular efficiency and your fluid management. But let's talk about why to heat training.
Yeah. So why would we do this? Why would we introduce a significant stress into the training plan? Why would we do this if we're training for Western states? Why would we do this if we're training for, a race like Leadville that's hot and you're very close to the sun? So again, one, that increase in plasma volume that can lead to a significant increase in performance. Mm-hmm. So that boosts your cardiovascular efficiency in all conditions.
Love that.
We love it when we're heat trained and the race is unexpectedly cool.
Got blood popping out my pores. So much blood right now.
So your blood is what's transporting heat from your core to your skin. And that's for essentially that creates evaporative cooling, and increased plasma volume increases your capacity to transfer that heat from your core out of your body. And when it does that, your core's temperature stays lower, your RPE stays more manageable, you feel better in the heat, you don't have as many of those like moments where your heart rate starts to climb, or your head gets lightheaded, you feel like you're flushed. All that stuff. I just remember Western states last year being in those ovens. It's really important. So it also improves your thermoregulation, so you stay cooler longer. You're also going to start sweating sooner.
Love that.
So this helps you stay way ahead of rising core temp. And I think this is also a byproduct of getting fitter too. So, some of you guys who are really self-aware athletes out there might notice like, okay, I used to like start sweating around 15 minutes into a run, and now it's happening 10 minutes into a run. And like, that's a sign that one, fitness is improving, and two, you're getting more adjusted to higher temperatures because your body will just turn on the cooling system and start that sweat sooner, which also means you have to start hydrating a lot sooner than you think in your runs. So your body kicks on that primary cooling system, which is your sweat, gets it into action really, really early. And it goes earlier than if you're not acclimated to the heat.
Yeah, and you sweat more profusely. Your body learns to just open the floodgates.
It does, literally. That's what it's like.
To just get more fluid volume onto the skin surface for evaporative cooling, it's cool. It's cool that our bodies learn how to be wet better. And you'll sweat more evenly. You have sweat glands all over your body, and your body needs to increase evaporative cooling, so you'll just sweat more from everywhere. So less just like the pits and wherever, to sort of everywhere. You'll also, dilation, as you train, can retain more sodium. So your sweat glands adapt to retain more sodium and electrolytes, even as sweat rate and fluid losses increase. So that, along with a regulation from your kidneys, helps maintain sodium concentrations in the body. But that's not to the point where you're not going to be doing a ton of like adjusting of your sodium concentration when it comes to the hydration strategy. So you get that increase in blood plasma volume, and that's what's transporting heat from your core to your skin for the radiant cooling and evaporative cooling. And it's that increased plasma volume that really increases your capacity for heat transfer and provides that fluid for sweat.
Yeah.
And all of those things only work when you're properly hydrated. So big part of it.
And kind of some secondary things that are really important to this process is running in the heat and being heat adapted. It teaches your body to pace better in those conditions and to fuel under those stresses. It also helps you become more mentally tough in those conditions. So like you're going to be a little bit less inclined to feel like the heat is impacting your performance. And so even cool weather races benefit because improved blood flow and fluid management is just going to make you race better in all conditions. And also, again, we talked about this earlier, that reduction in RPE in the heat. So it gets hotter, but your RPE stays more manageable.
So let's talk about how to do heat training. So easy way, 7 to 14 days of consecutive exposure is ideal. Consistency matters more than duration. So we usually recommend that athletes start with moderate intensity sessions in natural heat. So just running at midday or in potentially warm indoor settings. We don't want people to go balls to the wall right away and try to do, a 20-mile run at high noon and then spend 90 minutes in the sauna.
Oh gosh, that would be way too much.
Yep.
You can add passive heat, sauna, or hot baths after runs. We're going to talk about the specific protocol. If you're doing that, you don't want to just add those in a la carte. They really need to happen at specific times and for specific amount of days in a row in order to elicit adaptations. And really in meaningful adaptations, the ones that we're talking about where you actually get the benefit of increased sweat and lower core temp and better thermoregulation, all that stuff.
Yeah. So, we usually recommend athletes start with lower training intensity at the beginnings of the acclimation process. Don't try to be hitting we're always running by effort, not by pace. So definitely don't try to cram your normal paces into hotter than normal temperatures. And again, hydration is a non-negotiable here. For most people, we're looking at somewhere between 500 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium an hour with a huge amount of wiggle room for individual variation. And then maybe 18, 16, 20 to 28 ounces of fluids, depending on your sweat rate.
Liter an hour. I've got a lot of liter an hour, guys.
We have a 4 liter an hour. I'm making that up.
No, I definitely have a couple of folks who are 2-3 liters an hour sweat rate.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So efficient. so sweaty.
Monitor your fatigue as you start any kind of consecutive exposure to heat. It's so important. Check your urine color, see if you're dehydrated, check your morning weight. You want to be
clear and copious.
Yeah, track that hydration.
Copious, consistent.
Track your hydration status. Thank you, Zoe. 3 C's.
Former backpacking guide. Let's talk about the best ways to train for heat. So for a lot of folks, it's going to be plenty to just train in the natural heat when possible, running at your normal time, potentially, doing a few runs in the midday or in warmer indoor environments. And then you can use passive heat exposure after workout. So that's where the sauna or the hot baths can come into play to extend that heat stress. You don't want to go right from doing a super hot run to adding in the passive heat exposure. We want to make sure we're accounting for the increase in stress there.
Right. Build gradually. Don't jump into back-to-back heat workouts. I try to speed work, long runs, stressful enough. Try to do those in cool temperatures, honestly, to get the most out of building your fitness. And this is where we're going to talk about the protocol, because the best protocol for doing this is going to happen during deload periods and taper periods when your training volume is very low, so we can make room for additional stress on back-to-back days. Hydrate really well after these sessions, especially if we're going to do a passive protocol where you're jumping in the sauna or bath between the run, right after the run. You don't necessarily need to hydrate between those. And there are some studies to suggest that the proper protocol is to hydrate afterwards. And also, 7 to 14 days, that's how long it's going to take to start to feel a difference if you're out there running in the heat. Now, what's really important for athletes to realize is it takes relatively little effort to achieve a reasonable degree of heat acclimatization. Athletes get the majority of their adaptations from the first 3 days of a consecutive hot bath protocol, or a post-run hot bath, or a post-run sauna protocol. So you get 58% of your adaptations from those first 3 days.
Love that.
So this can happen if you're doing the hot bath or the sauna post-run, post-training. This can happen really, really quickly, but also the stress is very high doing this after a run. So has to be really well managed. So a proper protocol for athletes, like this is what we do with our Western States athletes, Badwater athletes, is we use a 2-phase protocol. The first phase, we're going to introduce heat in during a deload period, about 8 weeks out from an event. And in this phase, we're going to hit the athlete with usually 3 or 4 consecutive days of heat because we get the majority of the adaptations over those first few days. It also is minimally impactful to the training. So it works like really well in a moment like, for example, if the athletes got a deload period before they go and do a training camp.
Right.
Like the week before you go and do your Western States boot camp on Memorial weekend, 3 to 4 days of heat protocol, rest, 1 or 2 maintenance days, and then you go to the event. And that gives you, like the coach and you, an opportunity to see how you respond to the heat. So that first initial phase of the protocol is as much about getting those adaptations as it learning your responsiveness to the heat. How stressful is it for you as the athlete?
Yep.
Really, really important there. And then the second phase is during the taper. So again, you repeat a 6-day protocol to get the full extent of those adaptations. And it's ideal that you're in a sauna of at least 180 degrees or a hot bath of at least 140 degrees.
When we would go to the sauna and it would be like some old lady would turn it down to like 100 degrees. And I'm like, what are you even doing? Like, what are we doing here?
Right. If the sauna's below 140, you're not going to get much. Hot bath, 104 is a great temperature.
Hot tub temp.
Yes, hot tub temp. Most people's bathtubs at home get up to this level and they don't really realize it. So what's really cool about the hot bath protocol is
you can always break out the turkey thermometer.
You can do it at your house.
Yeah, do some science.
But it's really like, I can't stress this enough. Heat stress and training volume need to be separate parts of the plan. This is why I really don't like it when athletes try to do heat training all year round.
Yeah.
Because you can't both bring your volume up and heat train successfully. Heat is a lot of stress. And so that sauna intervention or that hot bath intervention, it's an extra stress. And so you need to fit it in when you're deloading, when your running stress is much lower. It's important also, like when you're in the sauna, learn what your cues are. A visual on your sweat puddle is a great way to see like if you're getting tangible results.
Yeah.
Just like when you're out running, your sweat rate starts to turn on and increase earlier in runs. It will as well as you go through a sauna or a hot bath protocol. You'll dilate a lot faster. You'll start to sweat a lot quicker. Those are great signs that you're starting to adapt.
I think overall, building that practice of learning to read your body, like getting more in touch with your body is it can be a benefit of yes, the sauna and the bath of it all, but just of like heat training generally. So let's talk a little bit about deteriorations. Your heat training will deteriorate somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3% per day. We always want to avoid the sauna in the 1 to 3 days before the race, the hot bath in that time period, so that we don't overdo it and like de-taper,
right.
Stress ourselves out right before the event with no time to actually recoup those physiological adaptations. And it's important to note that a 2 to 3% acclimation deterioration is not a 2 to 3% performance decline. Right. That could be like less than half a percent decline. Yeah. So you can also mix and match your approach, right? Like everyone's schedule and resources and bandwidth are different. You can alternate heat training methods. You don't need a perfect protocol to get the benefits. If you're training for a really hot race, something can be better than nothing, but I think being strategic is the most important thing. And heat training willy-nilly to the detriment of the big picture, to the detriment of your fitness, or again, thinking you can just like heat train your way to a marathon PR without having your structure dialed, your nutrition dialed. I think that's where a lot of people lose sight of things. Because like the people who are the loudest on the internet about heat training are like typically already like doing a lot of the big picture stuff, or maybe they aren't, right? Because like who the fuck wants to watch content about you eating 3 square meals a day and sleeping for 9 hours? But it's super sexy to share your sauna protocol, right? So there was actually a study that compared medium-term heat acclimation by post-exercise hot water immersion or exercise in the heat. And then it looked at adaptations, overreaching, and thyroid hormones. So this was an article that came out just 3 years ago in the Journal of Exercise Physiology. And so it looked 6 days post-exercise sauna or hot water immersion using 20 to 40 minutes in the water or 10 to 20 minutes in the sauna, which elicits around 58% of adaptations in a 6-day protocol. So the ideal exercise duration, as identified by this study, was 60 to 90 minutes prior to sauna or hot water immersion, complete 6 days in a row before the maintenance phase of heat training. So for more sensitive athletes, there were some benefits to just doing 3 to 4 days, followed by 3 to 4 days, 3 to 4 days on, 3 to 4 days off to get close to that maximal amount of adaptation, and then focusing on maintenance through the event with 2 non-exposure days before the event to keep stress low, especially if traveling.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. Like you can even do 3 non-exposure days, but the goal is to have some kind of exposure every 1 to 3 days after you've completed that 6-day protocol. And you do get the majority of the adaptations within those first 3 to 4 days. So it happens very quickly, which is why if you're a more sensitive athlete, it's okay to take a rest day from the heat on that 4th day or that 5th day and then do 3 additional or 4 additional days. You're not going to be losing that much in terms of like the percentage of adaptations that you could be getting. It's really, really important, guys. Heat acclimatization protocols, they will induce stress. They are a training stress in and of themselves. So if you're not taking some training off the table somewhere, you're going to end up in a fatigue hole. And that is going to really challenge your event readiness and the rest of your training, whatever kind of training you have left in your build, whether you're doing this in the taper or 8 weeks out. So keep fitness the main thing during the bulk of your training before a hot event. That's always going to be your number one buffer against the heat. I think the biggest takeaway from this study is there were no further statistically significant benefits or improvements to endurance or thermal adaptations after 6 days of consecutive sauna or hot water immersion post-run. So doing this all year round for extended period doesn't do much for athletes. It just adds extra training stress. So after heat acclimatization is achieved, you can maintain these adaptations by incorporating exposure to heat again once every 2 or 3 days, and you will degrade somewhere in the network of about 2 to 3% or 2.5% a day after the first 48 hours without exposure. So that's kind of where like working with your coach to put in place a protocol leading into your race that leaves you maximally adapted to the heat is really important, but not like overly cooked by how stressful it is.
Yeah. I think like when I trained for Western States, I did a sauna protocol and I found it helpful for that specific event, but I haven't repeated heat training for any other subsequent event. I mean, Western States is certainly an outlier. It was like 110 degrees in the canyons the year I did it. You heat trained for Leadville and you thought it was helpful.
It was so hot. I'm so glad that
I did not heat train, but I was healthy and I felt fine. I tend to do quite well in the heat, and I tell myself that I'm great at heat, and
which
that
matters.
is helpful. It does, yes. There are studies that, like, if you tell yourself, like, I'm bad in the heat, yeah, you're going to be bad in the heat. Yeah, that's where we're at on heat training. How often do you find yourself building that out for athletes?
I only do it for very specific events. Same. I find myself more often than not trying to provide athletes with like the educational information as to why they should not heat train.
Yeah.
Just to be completely honest.
Yeah, same.
Like, it's really hot and cool out there when you see a lot of like great runner / influencer personalities in the space talking about doing their long runs in a heat suit and all this stuff. It like there's not a lot of evidence to support that.
Yeah, the layering as a means that like I'm so curious as to where that idea comes from because it's not backed up by evidence.
I haven't seen anything. I was talking with a friend over the weekend who was like, no, studies in cycling are shifting to say that heat suits are the way to go. and passive heat's not as effective. But I mean, there are plenty of studies to say that the passive heat training really works.
Yeah, I mean, all of that is to say, like, the thing that does come through loud and clear is that it is additional stress.
Yeah.
And there are risks and there are benefits. So weighing those appropriately, given your background goals, resources, bandwidth, and needs, is important. I'm not going to be jogging around in a heat suit anytime soon.
No. And I do think it kind of the whole concept of heat training plays to the parts of us that wish there were silver bullets, like that wish there were shortcuts in this process. And like, yeah, heat training, yeah, it can definitely be helpful. It can help you perform well, especially if you're lucky and the event is cooler than you thought it would be. But it only works if it is really introduced in a meaningful way into your plan and is done with a lot of care and stress management around it. Without that, you're likely taking a shot in the dark. You're throwing an egg against the wall and hoping it doesn't break. I'm not like too interested in taking those risks with my own training or with my athletes, but I have trained a half a dozen people for Western States at this point, and every single one of them has done this 6-day protocol with the 2 phases. Depending on the sensitivity, we have done the 4-day on, 1 off, 3-day on, and not done the 6-day in a row protocol. Every single one of those athletes finished Western States. So I don't know if that's why they finished, but certainly
I think for that race, it is
certainly
like
it's helpful.
That one, Javelina, Bad Water, like there are some specific events where it's extremely helpful. But you don't need to, if you want to buy a hot tub, buy a hot tub.
Yes, I'm so happy that I haven't had any athletes DNF Western.
Me neither.
Yeah, that makes me feel
Only
good.
me.
That's a hot race. It's a hard one to train for. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Again, we'd love to hear from you. Microcosm@gmail.com. Check out our coaching offerings. We'd love to work with you guys. We've got some really great coaches. Zoe and I currently don't have any roster spots open, but that doesn't mean we don't have the people who can support you as part of our team. Reach out, check us out, microcosm-coaching.com. See you next week.